So, why should a rule be generated? For sure, a mental rule is generated to account for certain uh, phonetic facts. That is to say, is to account for predictable or allophonic relations of the pronunciation of sound. A mental rule is to explain the changes that sounds undergo when they are merged to combine words. But this means that phonemes influence each other, and this impact results in certain changes. These changes are examples of new predictable facts of the pronunciation of phonemes. And the function of the phonological rule is to match between the phonemic representation and the phonetic representation for explaining the changes that occur to sound when they are pronounced. To understand how a phonological rule works, we have to focus on the phonetic representation and not on the phonemic representation, because the phonemic representation is underlying and abstract, and we cannot understand a mental element from a mental element based on a mental element. No, we are going to understand the mental rule by means of the phonetic representation. We will observe data, and based on the observation we will describe it, and the description requires analysis, and the analysis is based on both aspects, on the phonetic aspect and the phonemic aspect. And the focus of this analysis for sure is a mental rule. So, to understand how a phonological rule works or why it is generated, we have to focus on data. And so, why should a rule be generated? For sure, a mental rule is generated to account for certain uh, phonetic facts. That is to say, is to account for predictable or allophonic relations of the pronunciation of sound. A mental rule is to explain the changes that sounds undergo when they are merged to combine words. But this means that phonemes influence each other, and this impact results in certain changes. These changes are examples of new predictable facts of the pronunciation of phonemes. And the function of the phonological rule is to match between the phonemic representation and the phonetic representation for explaining the changes that occur to sound when they are pronounced. To understand how a phonological rule works, we have to focus on the phonetic representation and not on the phonemic representation, because the phonemic representation is underlying and abstract, and we cannot understand a mental element from a mental element based on a mental element. No, we are going to understand the mental rule by means of the phonetic representation. We will observe data, and based on the observation we will describe it, and the description requires analysis, and the analysis is based on both aspects, on the phonetic aspect and the phonemic aspect. And the focus of this analysis for sure a mental is a mental rule. So to understand how a phonological rule works or why it is generated, we have to focus on data and observe it and describe it. Take for example a phonetic fact in the English language. Aspiration. Here we are dealing with, as you notice, we are dealing with voiceless stop in the English language. We are dealing with voiceless stop in the English language. There are two types of stop here. The first part is aspirated stop. Okay. The second part is about an aspirated stop. The observation that we can have here, or we can list here, in the first group, the stop is aspirated because it is not preceded by the voiceless alveolar fricative. In the second group, the stops are not aspirated because they are preceded by a voiceless alveolar fricative. And there is a rule in the English language: when there is a complex cluster in the initial position of word or of syllable, we mean by complex cluster three consonants in the onset position, the first sound must be the voiceless alveolar fricative. Must be the voiceless alveolar fricative. Take for example the word spray. Look at the initial. We have three consonants in the initial position, and the first consonant is an S, followed by a stop, and then followed by a sonorant. In split, this word has a complex cluster in the onset position. The first sound is the voiceless alveolar fricative. Importantly, when stops are preceded by the voiceless alveolar fricative, they are not aspirated. So our objective is to prove, that aspirated stops are predictable and unaspirated stops are basic. And if we want to prove this, we have to focus on data before we explain the data using phonological. Okay, let us explain aspirated stop. Look, let's start with, or let us take just one example, the bilabial, the voiceless bilabial stop. In the word pool and pit, look that the voiceless bilabial stop is aspirated because it is followed by a vowel. And in the word apply, it is aspirated because it is followed by a liquid. And in the word prawn, it is aspirated because it is followed by a rhotic liquid. And in play, it is aspirated because it is followed by uh, a lateral liquid. In the last word, fuse, it is aspirated because it is followed by a glide. So, voiceless stop are aspirated when they are followed by a vowel or a liquid or a glide. In the first two words, f is followed by a vowel. In the other word, it is followed by a sonorant. The same for the voiceless alveolar stop. The same for the voiceless alveolar stop. In the first three words, t is followed by a vowel. When it is followed by a vowel, this sound is aspirated. And when it is followed by a sonorant, this word is aspirated. The same for the voiceless velar stop. When in the first three words, look, this sound is followed by a vowel, therefore it is aspirated. In the last three words, it is followed by a sonorant, therefore it is aspirated. So, the issue is not only about whether it is preceded by an S or not. Another observation is that when the voiceless stop is not preceded by an S and is followed by a vowel or liquid or a glide, it is aspirated. When the voiceless stop is followed by a vowel or a sonorant consonant, it is aspirated. So this is up to now this is a statement. It is not a rule, but it is a statement that we are going to transmit it into a phonological rule. But before doing this, we have to answer some questions, some basic questions. So this means, according to the data, this means that the voiceless stop, the voiceless velar stop, and the voiceless alveolar stop, and the voiceless bilabial stop are phonemes. However, what makes phonologists consider t, for example, and not the aspirated t as a phoneme in the English language? What makes phonologists claim or consider the plain t as a phoneme and the aspirated t as an allophone in the English language? Is it the mental rule? No. It is the description of the data. It is the distribution of each sound within different phonetic environments. Look, if the sound has only one specific phonetic environment in which it occurs, so it is not phonemic. Its pronunciation is predictable, it is not basic. However, when the sound has different position, okay, or has different position within words, we can say it is a basic pronunciation, and the basic pronunciation is the is similar to the mental representation. The basic pronunciation of sound keep the same features of the mental representation of sound. That's why the basic allophone is what determines the phoneme. If we depend on the phonetic data to prove whether this is a phoneme or an allophone. If the pronunciation is predictable, so it is allophonic. If the pronunciation is basic, this basic pronunciation proves that it is taken from the mental representation because it keeps the features of the mental representation. Let us explain this by using data. The same data. To prove that the unaspirated voiceless alveolar stop is the phoneme and not the aspirated voiceless stop, we have to make more observation and more observation on the position. Okay, we have to describe the position and the distribution of each sound within words. Look, in the first two words, the voiceless alveolar stop is followed by a vowel, and in the second two words, it's followed by a sonorant consonant. Therefore, the sound is aspirated. In the third two words, the sound is not aspirated because it is preceded by a voiceless alveolar fricative. In the last three words, okay, in the last three words, we have two syllables in this word. In each word, we have two syllables. In retire, the stop is aspirated because it is followed by a vowel, and because it occurs at initially in the syllable. Look, we cannot say that a stop can be aspirated if it occurs medially. No, because we are not dealing with words. To explain the position of sound, we focus on syllables and not the words. So here in retire, the stop occurs in the onset position of the second syllable. In restore, it occurs in the onset position of the second syllable. In stool, we have one syllable, and it occurs initially in the onset position of the syllable. In twine, it occurs in the onset position of the syllable. So in twine, it is aspirated, but in stool, it is not aspirated. So importantly, here we have, in this data, we have two pronunciations of the voiceless alveolar stop. The first pronunciation is aspiration, and the second pronunciation is not aspirated. Within one position, that is to say, within the onset position of the syllable. So, in the onset position of the syllable, we have both pronunciation. We have aspirated stop, and we have an aspirated stop. Let us have a look at the final position of the syllable. If one of them only occurs finally, it means that this sound is basic. Okay? If one of them only occurs at the end of the syllable, so this sound is basic and the other one is predictable. Look, for example, food, pet, account, spit, split, sa. Look, that the last consonant of this word is the voiceless alveolar stop. It is not aspirated. It is not aspirated. And there is no aspiration at the final position of the syllable. So, this means that the aspirated stop has only one position, which is the onset position of the syllable. However, the unaspirated stop has two positions. It can occur at the initial position of the syllable and at the final position of the syllable. This make us this makes us judge and conclude that the aspirated stop stands for the predictable variant of the phoneme, and the unaspirated stop stands for the basic pronunciation of the phoneme. We say it is basic because it has different distribution, and the aspirated stop is not basic, it is predictable because it has only one specific environment in which it occurs. Here we need a rule, okay? Here we need a mental rule to match between the phonemic representation and a phonetic representation. So, before talking about the rule, let us explain uh, the tree of allophones and phonemes. This is the phoneme symbolized by an X, and this is the head of the tree. This is the head of the tree. It has two complements, an X and Y. Okay, we can call the X a subject and Y a complement. Look, the X, look, this allophone, and both of them are two allophones of the same phoneme. And we have other allophones. Okay, both of them are two allophones of the same phoneme. X is the mental representation because we have flash bars. And here we have another X, okay, and it is governed by the higher X because the higher X is phonemic and the lower X is not phonemic. But why the lower X? Why the first variant of the phoneme has the same symbol of the phoneme, an X? This is simply because the plain alveolar stop has the same features of the mental representation of the phoneme. Okay, has the same feature of the phonemes, the abstract and mental representation of sound. And we call it the elsewhere because it exists in different positions. It exists initially and finally. Y is the second variant of the phoneme, and we call it predictable because it has only one specific environment. And look, the symbol is different because it is Y, and the symbol is different from the symbol given to the mental representation. Importantly, the lower X is not mental. It is phonetic. It is similar to Y because both of them are phonetic. And X is a basic pronunciation, and what makes us determine that it is a basic pronunciation because it exists in different positions within the word. Okay, that's why we call it the elsewhere. And what makes us claim that the Y is a predictable pronunciation, stand for a predictable pronunciation, is its distribution within a word. That is to say, it has only a specific phonetic environment, and it is clear that the aspirated voiceless stop occur only when it is followed by a vowel and a sonorant consonant, and when it is not preceded by a voiceless alveolar. There is more evidence for claiming that the plain voiceless alveolar stop is the phoneme and the aspirated stop is an allophone. The first evidence is taken from uh, a phonetic fact called glottalization. Okay, is a phonetic fact called glottalization. Look, when here we have four words, four one syllable words, and the last consonant of this word, rat, for example, the last consonant is the voiceless alveolar stop. When this stem is combined with another suffix to derive the verb, a change occurs to the last consonant of the stem. That is to say, the voiceless alveolar stop becomes a glottalized stop when it is followed by a nasal consonant, alveolar nasal consonant, okay? The nasal alveolar consonant. In rat, for example, it is pronounced ra'un. And it is not a glottal stop, it is a glottalized stop, because the glottal stop is a phoneme and the glottalized stop is a predictable pronunciation of the phoneme t in the word rat, for example. The same for the word high. To derive the verb heighten from high, we add the verbalizer to the stem high, and the last consonant of the stem is influenced by the nasal consonant of the suffix, and this influence results in glottalization. That is to say, the phoneme which is the last consonant of the stem, the voiceless alveolar stop, is glottalized because of the impact of the nasal consonant within the suffix. So here the basic pronunciation is voiceless alveolar stop, and the predictable pronunciation is glottalized alveolar stop. Okay, is the glottalized stop, which means that there is another variant rather than aspiration, okay, of the same phoneme. Another evidence is called flapping. Okay, it's called flapping. Look that the last consonant of the four words or the four verbs is the voiceless alveolar stop. When these verbs are attached to the suffix ing, okay, the last consonant is influenced. The last phoneme, which is the voiceless alveolar stop, is influenced and pronounced differently. And pronounced differently. That is to say, the last consonant is flapped. Okay, is flapped. Hit, hitting. Put, putting. Set, setting. Let, letting. So it is another variant of the phoneme, which is the voiceless alveolar stop. These are pieces of evidence that t is a phoneme and the aspirated stop is an allophone. Look, t is glottalized, that is to say realized as the glottal stop. T is flapped, that is realized as a flapped rhotic. So these are these are different predictable uh, facts of the pronunciation. So the phoneme is the plain voiceless alveolar stop. It has four variants. It has four variants. The phoneme is the underlying representation, and the four variants are phonetic representations, and we call them allophones. The first look, it has the same symbol as the underlying representation, X and X, because it keeps the same features of the mental representation. And we call it the elsewhere because it exists in different positions. It can occur initially and it can occur finally. Y stands for the first predictable variant, that is to say the aspirated stop. And it has only one specific environment, which is it is aspirated when it is followed by a vowel or a sonorant. The second predictable variant is the glottalized stop. It's about glottalization. And it has only a specific environment. It, it is glottalized when it is followed by a nasal consonant in the suffix. Okay? When it is followed by a nasal consonant in the verbalizer that derives the verb that derives a verb from a noun. The last predictable variant, okay, the last predictable variant is the flatted, okay, is the flatted voiceless alveolar stop. It is flatted only in one specific environment when it occurs between two vowels and when we derive a verb, when we derive a present participle or a gerund from a verb which has the voiceless alveolar stop as the last component of the syllable. Importantly, the first variant is basic because it occurs in different positions of the word, and the third variant are predictable because they have specific phonetic environment. Okay? So the mental rule should explain, should explain how a phonetic realization is predictable. Let's start with aspiration. Let's start with aspiration. It is a voiceless alveolar stop. We use the arrow. Okay, we use the arrow. It means becomes. And now we are introducing the student to the way we form a phonological rule. A voiceless alveolar stop. The arrow means become or change it to. Aspirated stop. Aspirated stop. The slash means the environment where. Dash means before. Vowels or approximate. Vowels or approximate. This is not a mental rule. It is just a phonetic description. This is a phonetic description. It cannot be mental. To formulate a mental rule, we have to focus on distinctive features and not phonetic parameters or phonetic marks. We have to elaborate more and more on distinctive features because distinctive features are mental representations of the phoneme. Okay, are the mental representations of the sound. Formulation of phonological rule requires using distinctive features rather than phonetic description. Let us make a rule by means of phonological, by means of distinctive features. Let us make a phonological rule that can account for aspiration as a new predictable fact of the pronunciation of the voiceless alveolar stop by means of using distinctive features. So, the phoneme is the voiceless alveolar stop. Okay? First, it is plus consonantal. And when we say plus consonantal, we exclude and remove all the vowels. And the consonantal feature is a major class feature. Minus sonorant is another major class feature, and this feature is to classify consonant into two parts, sonorant and obstruent. When we say minus sonorant, so here we remove all the sonorant sounds. Up to now, we are given the representation of obstruent consonant. And when we say obstruent consonant, we mean stop, affricate, and fricative. Stop, affricate, and fricative. But the sound we are dealing with here is the stop, sound. So we have to remove fricative and affricate. we use the feature minus continuant. Okay, continuant. Okay, when we use minus continuant, we remove fricative because all fricative are continuant sounds. Up to now, we are describing or we are representing stop consonant and affricate consonant. We use another distinctive feature to remove the affricate sound, which is minus delayed release. The four distinctive features are about stop consonant. The four distinctive features together stand for stop consonant. Our objective is to give the mental representation of the voiceless alveolar stop. We have six stop in the English language. Three are voiced and three are voiceless. Let us remove the voiced stop by using minus voice. Up to now, we are representing the voiceless alveolar stop and the voiceless velar stop and the voiceless bilabial stop. We need another feature that can select the voiceless alveolar stop out of the tree and remove the voiceless velar stop and the voiceless bilabial stop. Therefore, we will appeal to a feature of place of articulation because the difference among the three sounds lies at the level of the place of articulation. There are two distinctive features related to the place of articulation of consonants. These are coronal and anterior. Let's start with coronal. If coronal is enough to give the minimal representation of this consonant, we are not going to use the other feature anterior. Let's see. If we say plus coronal, we mean the sound that are produced by the tip or the blade of the tongue. P is not realized in this way, and the voiceless velar stop is not realized in this way. Therefore, they are excluded and removed from the representation. Accordingly, all these distinctive features represent only one sound, which is the voiceless alveolar stop. Voiceless alveolar stop is phonetic description, but the comprising all these features is a mental representation. So this is the underlying representation explained by means of distinctive feature. Okay, we use the arrow. We use the arrow, and the arrow means becomes or this phoneme changes to what? From an assertive to assertive. Because the phoneme is not asserted in its nature. So it changed to aspirated consonant. It changed to aspirated consonant. The environment where when it occurs before a sonorant sound. When it occurs before a sonorant sound. And when we say sonorant sound, a liquid, a glide, a vowel, or a nasal. So the phonological rule matches between the phonemic representation and the phonetic representation. Explain how the phoneme is realized differently. But a rule cannot label and cannot explain different phonetic facts. A mental rule can only explain one phonetic or one predictable fact of the pronunciation of one phoneme. So this is the way we formulate a phonological rule. The formulation is not total, but up to now we explained how a mental rule can account for the predictable pronunciation of phoneme and can explain the change that occurs to phonemes when they are influenced by other phonemes within a phonetic environment or within a word. Up to now, we use only the arrow and the slash, and that okay, that can explain the change and can explain the environment. There are other notations that we will deal with them in the upcoming lectures of phonological rules. In this lecture, in this presentation, we are just introducing you to the function of the phonological rule. Why should we use a phonological exercise? Here we have two types of data, and the question is, what is the distribution of the sound two vowels? The first one is the high front and round vowel, which is oral, and the second one is the nasalized high front and round vowel in the data given. Are they separate phonemes or allophones of the same phoneme? Justify. To prove that each one is an allophone and the other is a phoneme, we will focus on the distribution of each sound in the in different phonetic environments. So let us to answer this question. Let us apply the same method we did for the aspiration issue. This is the data. In the data uh, in the row that start with the word ship, look, all the vowels are oral. All the vowels are oral. The vowel in ship is oral because it is followed by an oral consonant. The vowel in pick is oral because it is followed by an oral consonant. The vowel in bill is oral because it is followed by an oral consonant. However, if you take for granted the second type of data, the vowel in ring, for example, is nasalized because it is followed by a nasal consonant. The vowel in sing is nasalized because it is followed by a nasal consonant. Okay, importantly, both vowels are at the peak of the syllable. That is to say, they are syllabic. They both occur between two consonants. Okay, as in the word ship, the oral vowel occur between two voiceless consonants. And in the word ring, the nasalized vowel occurs between two consonants. They both initiate the syllable, as in the word ill for the oral vowel and in for the nasalized vowel. They don't contrast here. In the data given, the nasalized vowel does not contrast with the oral vowel. Can we state that they are not phoneme because they don't contrast? This is the only way. We will say that they are not contrastive if they don't contrast with other vowels. Okay, consider the following data. Do they contrast with other phonemes? Yes. Look, in the word sit and sat. The oral vowel in sit contrasts with the oral vowel in sat. So we can say that the two vowels are phonemes because they are contrastive. They distinguish the meaning of the two words. Okay? According to this example, we can say that the oral vowel is a phoneme because it contrasts with another vowel in the same phonetic environment. Let us take an example of the nasalized vowel. Tin and tan. Look, in tin we have a nasalized vowel and in tan we have a nasalized vowel. So the two nasalized vowel contrast. The two nasalized vowel contrast. Okay? So here we may say that both of them are phoneme because they distinguish the meaning of the two words. Okay. Minimal pair is not enough. Phonological opposition is not enough to to assume or to conclude that this is a phoneme and this is an allophone. Okay, we need another piece of evidence to prove which one is phonemic. Okay, up to now they can contrast in different phonetic environment. Okay, uh, the oral vowel contrast within an oral environment, and the nasalized vowel contrast within a nasalized environment. Okay, so up to now we haven't yet, we haven't yet uh, uh, departed between the two. We know the fact in the English language you don't have a nasal phoneme, vowel phoneme. We know this, but we'd like to prove. We have to prove. Up to now, according to the method we are approaching or we are following, we haven't yet proven that the oral vowel is the phoneme and the nasalized vowel is an allophone. Okay, so we will see the distribution of each sound within these words. Okay, if one of them has different position, in word, we can say it is a basic allophone. And if the second has only one specific environment, we say it is a predictable allophone. And the basic allophone stands for the phoneme, while the predictable allophone stands for the allophone. Let's start with the oral vowel. Let us start with the oral vowel. The oral vowel, okay, occurs before a stop, as in the word ship and the word pick. It also occurs before a liquid, as in the word bill, as in the word bill, and ill. It also occurs syllable final, as in the word happy. In happy we have two syllables, okay, and in the second syllable, this vowel occurs finally. It is not followed by any consonant, so it is syllable final. In addition to the fact that it is also syllable initial, it can occur initially. So what about the nasalized vowel? It occurs only before a nasal. It occurs only before a nasal, and it never occurs syllable final. It never occurs syllable final. So, according to this classification, we see that the oral vowel has different environments in which it occurs. However, the nasalized vowel has only one specific environment. That is to say, it occurs before a nasal consonant, okay, at the end of a syllable. At the end of a syllable. And it never occurs syllable final. Okay, it never occurs a syllable final. So this makes us conclude that the elsewhere variant is the oral front high and round vowel, and conclude that the predictable variant of the phoneme is the nasalized high front and round vowel. So the phoneme is the high front and round vowel, the oral high front and round vowel, and the allophone is the nasalized vowel. So the phoneme is the high front and round vowel. It has two allophones. The first allophone is the basic one, which is the elsewhere variant, and the second allophone is the which is the predictable variant, that is to say the nasalized high front and round vowel, which has only one specific environment, that is to say it occurs before a nasal consonant. We may have other allophones of this phoneme, okay? We may have other allophones of this phoneme, but if we take for granted this data that we have, we are dealing only with two allophones, the nasalized uh, allophone and the oral, okay, the oral allophone. Importantly, a mental rule should be generated to account or to govern the predictable pronunciation. Okay, to govern the predictable pronunciation and to account for the change that occurs in the predictable pronunciation of this vowel phoneme. Okay, let's formulate a rule. Minus consonantal. Here we remove all the consonants. We are dealing with a vowel. Plus syllabic. Here we remove all the semi-vowels. So the two features comprise that we are dealing with the vowel phoneme. Plus high, we remove all the low vowel, not yet the mid vowel. That's why we add another feature which is minus low. When we say plus high minus low, it means that we remove both the low vowel and the mid vowel. Minus back, which means that we remove all the back vowel, and we are talking only about the front vowel, and we have many front vowel, but here according to minus low and plus high, we are dealing only with the high front and round vowel by adding minus round. Okay, so here we have two types of vowel, either the short high front and round vowel or the long high front and round vowel. Therefore we need another feature to exclude the long vowel, because here we are dealing with a short vowel. So we add the feature tense. Minus tense is about short vowel. Plus tense is about lax vowel, and plus tense is about long vowel. Okay, so minus tense, here we remove